Hey fellow bookworms, my name is Caroline and I like to read books, so let's talk about them. Today's video is going to be a full series review of the Fullmetal Alchemist manga series by Hiromu Arakawa. Ain't no way I'm holding this up the entire time. This is a 27 volume series which I binge read recently and absolutely adored. I have quite a lot of thoughts that I want to share with you guys and I'm going to try and keep everything spoiler free in case some of you guys want to read this. Basically, in this series, we follow two brothers, Edward and Alphonse Elric, who are what's known as alchemists. Alchemy is this kind of combination of magic and science where you can create one thing from something else using what's known as transmutation. Before the story begins, when the Elric brothers were younger, they dabbled in alchemy that they didn't completely understand, and the transmutation process went really wrong for them, and this meant that the eldest brother, Edward, who is the blonde-haired one, lost an arm and a leg as punishment, and the younger brother, Alphonse, ended up just becoming a soul bound to a suit of armor. When Fullmetal Alchemist begins, we meet the brothers as somewhere around 14-year-olds, and they are on a quest to get their original bodies back. I'm going to structure this series review like I would one of my normal book reviews, so I'm going to do pros, then cons, then I'm going to do a bit of discussion towards the end to wrap things up. I ended up giving every single one of the 27 volumes 5 out of 5 stars because I am absolutely in love with this series, so what that means is that I do have more pros to share than I do cons, so let's just get into this. The first pro that I want to mention is the humor. What's really great about this series is that our two main characters are brothers and they actually act like brothers. They argue, they bicker, they call each other names, they have little jokes together, and it's so sweet and it makes it so funny at so many little moments throughout the series. There are so many recurring jokes that I just loved so much. One of my favorites was that Edward absolutely hated being called little or short or anything to do with his height and would get absolutely like incensed when anyone mentioned it to him. It was so funny and it happened so frequently throughout the series that it was just adorable and hilarious. I also really loved the dynamic between the brothers and their childhood best friend Winry because when the three of them were together it would always be funny in some kind of way, and I just think that was really great. The second pro I want to mention is that there were some really interesting discussions about morality and stuff like that throughout the series. Because Fullmetal Alchemist is just about these two brothers on their quest to get their bodies back, it can be seen as quite light on the surface, but underneath that it's actually quite deeply philosophical and raises some really interesting questions about life and death and the afterlife and what's good, what's evil, what's right and what's wrong. Things are never simple for the characters in this series, and I think that's what made it really interesting. Anytime the Elric brothers had to make a decision, it wouldn't just affect them, it would have repercussions that would be felt by all the characters around them, and I think that really helped their character development. It was the same for a lot of the other characters, and I think what that ends up meaning was that although we had a lot of characters who were very much good and a lot of characters who were very much evil, we had so many characters that fell somewhere in the middle because things just weren't that simple. The next pro that I want to mention is that the story is complex and emotionally gripping. Obviously things start pretty small with just our two Elric brothers trying to get their bodies back, but slowly more and more people become involved in this quest. People try to help them, they tell more and more people about what they're doing, and that kind of just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. We also have Roy Mustang, who is the flame alchemist and kind of a tentative ally at first to the Elric brothers, and through him we learn a lot more about the military system and political corruption and stuff like that, and that just makes the entire web of things even bigger. One thing I do want to mention though is that when I say complex, I don't want you to mistake my meaning and think I'm saying that the story is confusing, because there was never a point in this series when I was confused. There are different pieces of the puzzle from different plot lines that you have to put together, but it's not difficult to do so. In the end, there were just so many characters that I was emotionally invested in who were super involved in the story, and that made it incredibly difficult to put down. Pro, whatever number I am up to, is that there was a whole bunch of amazing, strong female characters in this manga. There was just such a great range of female badasses in this series, and it made me so happy to read about them. We have Winry, who is not only their childhood best friend, but is also an amazing engineer. We have Lieutenant Hawkeye, who is Mustang's second in command and is just the best sniper ever. There's Azumi Curtis, who is a housewife, but also is so much more because she taught the Elric brothers everything they know. There's more, but I think you get the point by now. It was just so awesome to read about them. They grew throughout the series and they were just so amazing. The final pro that I want to mention is the pacing of this series. I kept expecting things to hit a lull around volumes like 18 to 22 because then the final 5 volumes would be absolutely batshit crazy, but it never really happened. Things were just consistently excellent. There were definitely some moments in individual volumes that felt a little bit slower than others, but I was never bored. It always felt like it was fast-paced when it needed to be, but then there were times when we got background information and that was really well done as well. Onto the cons now, and I only have two that I want to mention. The first of these is that sometimes the combat was a little bit hard to follow on the page. This could just be my personal experience, but I felt like sometimes things were just a little bit too busy on the page. There was a bit too much happening and I couldn't tell the specifics of what was happening in the fight sequence. I knew overall that two people were attacking each other and who was making what moves, but I just didn't quite get the specifics, and that made it that little bit less enjoyable for me. The second con I want to mention is something I noticed much more towards the end of the story, and it's that the changes in perspective were just that little bit too frequent, and it made it a little bit more jarring and kind of annoying. I do understand that we had a lot of different characters in a lot of different places and we had to check in on all of them, but there were times where we would get 2 pages with one character and 3 pages with the next, and it was just too little time with them, and it made it kind of weird for me. But again, could just be my personal experience, and it definitely didn't really diminish my enjoyment of the series. That's it for my pros and cons, but I do still have some more thoughts on the series that I want to share. I think if someone sat me down and asked me what the real strength of this series was, I would probably say that it's character development, because over the course of 27 volumes, the characters underwent such massive changes that it was kind of amazing. Some of the changes aren't super obvious or anything like that, but I think there are probably 4 characters who went through the most change in this series. There is one character who I think was incredibly well developed, but I'm not going to name them because they get introduced reasonably early, and I think it's a bit of a spoiler to let on how much of an impact they have on the story, so I'm kind of just going to leave them out of this. But the other characters whose development was really great are Edward, Alphonse, and Roy Mustang. At the beginning of the series, when we meet the Elric brothers, they are quite young and they're still reeling from this tragedy in their life. But then as the series goes, they have to make this choice about whether their quest is more important than this bigger picture. And that's really interesting for them, and I think they grow so much from it. Roy Mustang is a character who struggles with grief and guilt and revenge and the weight of being a hero. It gets super emotional at times, but again, I think he gets such amazing character development out of it. Obviously, over the course of 27 volumes, a lot of our characters get a lot of amazing character development, but I think the Elric brothers and Roy Mustang have some of the best I've read. I have been asked by quite a few people if I was happy with the ending of this series, and the short answer to this question is yes. The long answer is that it didn't end the way I had predicted, which is actually a good thing because my prediction was pretty fucking terrible. I do think that the final volume went a little too quickly because after 26 volumes it wrapped things up very speedily, but I was still super happy with the ending. I cried and it was both happy and sad, which I think is kind of the ideal ending for a series. Picking a favorite character is pretty much fucking impossible, but I think maybe Alphonse? Maybe Winry? See, I don't know. I also really liked that there was this little section of extras at the end of each volume where the author would put an in memoriam section for whoever died in that volume and would do extra panels with the characters in joke scenarios, which was really funny. I'm actually super excited to watch the anime now so I can fangirl about that too. That's pretty much it for this review though, guys. I definitely recommend this series in case you can't tell already. It's funny, it has amazing characters, it's light, but it also has some kind of darker stuff lurking beneath that, and it's just amazing. I upload videos Wednesdays, Saturdays, and sometimes Mondays as well, so be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Toodaloo!